This is an age of disruption, of profound revolutionary change.
What we're really asking ministers is to empower the ambassadors.
The only thing that you really push forth is the truth.
You don't see many women represented when it comes to the decisions as to how to handle the pandemic.
Good afternoon. My name is Maya Delabaume. I'm a reporter covering politics in France and in the EU, and you are watching Politico Live, the live extension of Politico's journalism. I'm coming to you from the Residence Palace here in Brussels, and our conversation today will focus on the consequences of the French presidential elections, both in Paris and in Brussels. We are now 4 days after French President Emmanuel Macron won the second round of elections last Sunday against his far-right rival Marine Le Pen. And I won't surprise anybody here if I say that this re-election has been a rather peculiar one, with a president re-elected with less support than in 2017. Traditional parties that have suffered historic blows, the far-right National Rally that has doubled its percentage of support, and another anti-establishment political force, La France Insoumise, that has emerged as France's third political force. Maybe this is the end of the two-party system as we know it in France. In this unusually divided political landscape, we will first explore what this election means for France, the necessary political reconfiguration in view of the upcoming legislative elections in June, and secondly, what it means for the EU since two major parties have pledged for opt-outs or renegotiation of the EU treaties. So we have a fantastic speaker lineup, starting with a fireside chat with Clea Colcott, Politico's French politics reporter, and Cornelius Hirsch, our intelligence analyst, both connected from Paris, followed by a panel discussion with top French influencers to discuss France's leadership in Europe and analyze the results of Sunday's elections. But first things first, we have some housekeeping remarks here. So we would like to make this event as interactive as possible. You can participate by tweeting about it at @LivePolitico and ask questions through Slido using the hashtag #AfterTheElection. You know who we are, so I will be prioritizing questions which are sent with a name and organization, so it's transparent for our viewers and panelists. So now I'll pass the floor to my colleagues Clea and Cornelius, who will share their analysis of Sunday's results through data. So to you, Clea and Cornelius, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Maya. Thank you very much. As you've already perfectly set the stage, summarizing the results from last Sunday. It was really a peculiar election result. As you mentioned, the gap between Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen was much closer than 2017. But still, Macron won this election decisively with 58% over Marine Le Pen. And if you ask now what's been driving the result, I've prepared two charts for that to underline 2 points. That Macron very much can thank the elder voters in France. So we could almost call him the eldest statesman, Macron, because he won among the oldest age group. He won more than 70% of the votes, while especially younger voters also supported Marine Le Pen and were more inclined to support her this time around. And we also see very much a divided France, as you've already mentioned, and this urban-rural divide, which we've seen in several other Western democracies playing out, has very much also been the case in this French presidential election, with rural communities voting 50-50 between the far right and the progressive liberal camp of Emmanuel Macron, while very much the urban centers voted and supported Macron. And for example, in the Parisian area, in this metropolitan area, Macron was supported with 70%. So when we speak about the younger voters, then we saw that especially in the first round, they were very much inclined to vote for the far left Mélenchon. And we saw that from the first round to the second round, many of them indeed in the end decided to go for Macron one more time. Maybe not with a lot of enthusiasm, and it was more a vote against Le Pen than in favor of Macron. But still, we saw very much the fringes in the first round being boosted and getting a boost compared to 2017 with Mélenchon on the far left and Le Pen on the far right. And this leads me also to a question that I would have for my colleague Claire Calcutt. If we see now this result of 40%, of over 40% for the far right in the second round, and already Mélenchon and Le Pen over 20% in the first round, is France more divided than ever, Claire? And what would you say if someone said that more than 45% of France voted far right and is therefore supporting far right ideas in France?
Yes, so after the election here, I mean, it was a very somber mood, a very unusual victory for Macron. I mean, if you looked at read the newspapers the next day, it was all about how, the far right had made such gains in France. And in terms of Macron having won re-election, which is something that in 2 decades presidents haven't been able to do, was sort of overcast. What I would say is going out into villages and small towns that voted for Marine Le Pen is that there's much more than just a far right core there. There's a lot of people who are angry against the system, angry against globalization, who see Emmanuel Macron as representing a global elite that basically has abandoned people who are, in the working with small wages. A lot of them did feel uncomfortable, for instance, with some of Marine Le Pen's positions. So, for example, I had lots of people who voted for Marine Le Pen, but who were uncomfortable with the idea of banning the veil in France, banning the headscarf, sometimes for ethical reasons, but sometimes just because they thought it would create a conflict in France. And so what you're really seeing emerge in France is sort of 2 big blocks, like a sort of more mainstream, more in favor, pro-business bloc around Emmanuel Macron, and more populist movements on the far left and the far right, with Mélenchon and with Marine Le Pen. This sort of populist push is something that we're seeing across the world, of course, in the UK and in the US as well. The difference in France is that disappearance of the mainstream parties. So the Socialist Party, the Les Républicains Conservative Party, for the second election round, cruelly defeated. So, for instance, the Socialist Party leader Anne Hidalgo only got 2% of the vote, which is devastating for a party that 10 years ago was ruling France. And so that creates a lot of uncertainty as to what the future of France is about, because this means that basically beyond La République En Marche, there are few allies for Macron's party, and this will create questions and struggles ahead of parliamentary elections, which I think, Cornelius, you've been looking at.
Yeah, exactly. Because what I find interesting is that you underlined this difference also to France, right? Because a lot of central parties in Europe and across different elections have struggled. So this, the center left and the center right struggling is nothing new. But as you rightly said, really that they completely vanished more or less in this presidential election now for the second time already, not even making it, one of their candidates making it into the second round. That's really striking and unique to France. And the question really is what it means for this so-called, what many in France call the third round of the 2-round presidential election, the parliamentary election coming up in June. And whether they will struggle and see losses in to the same extent, because there has been one poll, and this poll has to be taken with a lot of salt. There's more than just a grain of salt. But one poll that came out from Harris Interactive poster showed that indeed Macron would manage to get once again an absolute majority also in the parliamentary election. But of course, a lot can still change. What's your take, Claire? Do you think that with his victory in the second round, Macron really does have a momentum, or like some kind of honeymoon period now that he can take maybe even into the parliamentary campaign?
Yeah, I mean, there's the traditional honeymoon period for elected presidents. I think his honeymoon's going to be very short, and it's already over. Yes, I mean, polls are very moving and not very reliable right now, because you've got a lot of horse trading that's going on in France. You know, the parties are discussing with each other alliances to be able to put forward candidates. We're seeing talks on the left, we're seeing talks on the far right. So all this is going to shift. I mean, I think that traditionally we've had, ever since parliamentary elections where, you know, the presidential mandate was reformed and parliamentary elections came after the election of the president, there's always been a tendency for French voters to return a majority for the president. It's logical. Why vote for somebody if you're not going to allow them to be able to push through their reforms? And so, as you say, it's expected Macron will get a majority. Now, things, however, do seem a lot trickier this time because we've had a lot of frustrated voters, particularly on the left, people who are tired of doing what they call le barrage républicain in France, which is voting for a candidate that they don't support in order to keep the far right out of power. And so the voters for Mélenchon's camp, the far left leader, are really vowing to do a good showing in the parliamentary elections. There's even been posters around saying, you know, Mélenchon's going to be our prime minister. You know, obviously that depends on his results. And so this is creating a lot of uncertainty about this barrage républicain. So whether going into the parliamentary elections, you know, the mainstream and the left will unite to keep far right candidates out of seats, which is traditionally what they do try and do. It may be that in the, you know, the second round of parliamentary votes, we will see candidates from the far left, candidates from the far right, mainstream candidates, and therefore potential for the far right to gain much more seats. Obviously, it all gets very complicated in the sort of last stages of it.
Yeah, but it's definitely no understatement to say that the political landscape over the past 5 years has changed completely, and that now ahead of this parliamentary election, we have basically three, or what we saw from the first round of the presidential election, they are based on those results, three main blocks, with this liberal Macron bloc, a far right bloc around Le Pen, and this far left bloc of Mélenchon. And how this will play out in this quite complicated system of the parliamentary election in France, will be really, really interesting to watch, and we'll make sure at Politico to follow all of that very, very closely. Claire, it was great talking to you, and thank you very much for this fireside chat. And I would say we give back to Maya into the studio.
Thanks.
So let's start our panel discussion. So we are very happy to have in this panel MEP Manon Aubry from La France Insoumise, who is also co-leader of the left in the European Parliament. We also have MEP François-Xavier Bellamy from the Les Républicains party in France and from the EPP European People's Party in the Parliament. And we have MEP Sandro Gozzi from Emmanuel Macron's list Renaissance and from the Renew Europe group in the European Parliament. As a matter of transparency, we have been in touch with all political parties for this panel, including the National Rally and the Greens Party. So my very first question will be very simple, and it goes to all three of you. If you had to draw one major lesson from this election result, what would it be? And I'll maybe start with Mr. Gozzi.
Well, the first message, in my view, is that there is a strong need to fight against inequalities. And that was, I think, apart of the positive thing that we might talk about this election, did a very strong message. It's not only a French message. On the contrary, I would say the inequalities in other countries in Europe are much more serious than in France, but that is a clear message of reunification. We need a reunification action. We need to reunite the country. We need to reunite the big centers and the periphery, as it was said by the influencer before. There is a strong need for a new form of dialogue to increase social cohesion and territorial cohesion, and also to work to give confidence again in the democratic system. It is clear that, I mean, the abstention, 26% for France presidential election is an high abstention. There again, is very low for other countries, but for France, it is a sign that we have to think to a new social policy to reduce inequalities, and also to open a very in-depth debate on how to reform the institution in France. And this is this transpartisan committee that Emmanuel Macron has promised, and it will be set up if we have a majority after the legislative election, is also an answer to the need to reunite the country, to ensure also a better representation of the French societies in the French institutions.
Okay, Mrs. Aubry is not here. Oh, she is here. She's joining us now. But so since Mr. Bellamy is here too, I'll repeat my question, which is, what conclusion do you draw? And do you see, as Mr. Gozzi said, a real need to unify this country, given also the level of frustration that we've heard and that Clea made clear? Mr. Bellamy, is you.
I thought it would be Manon's turn to speak.
Yes, but sorry, because she just showed up, so I was thinking of you first. But let's go with Manon then, Mrs. Aubry. So I was asking to the panelists what was the main lesson that they would draw from the result of this presidential election. So this is a question that I'm asking you. Is there a need to, as Mr. Gozzi said, unify the country?
Well, let me speak for our political family first, maybe, and because I think it's an interesting result, especially for us. Mélenchon's score was a big surprise. It was much higher than basically all of the polls. It was about 5 points more than the latest polls. And one of the reasons why it was higher than predicted, it was also because there was a massive mobilization, especially in the poorest suburbs, in city centers and among the youth, where he does his best results. And clearly, the results is a surprise, but it's also the result of a huge field work that has been done across during the time of the campaign. And the main takeaway after the first round of the French election is that there are three political families more or less of equivalent size. There is the far right that is led by Marine Le Pen. There's the liberal bloc that is led by Emmanuel Macron, and that has eventually won the election. And then there's the left bloc that has turned to be much higher than expected. And if you add those blocks together, so the results of the different political parties, but they can form, three different blocks, it's interesting to see that they're really of equivalent size. And the problem with our current institution, with this, 2 rounds of election, and with what we call the Fifth Republic, so the current political system in which we are, is that there's no way of translate these 3 blocks into 3 different political blocks working together. And I think this will be the interesting discussion ahead of the legislative election, to know whether Emmanuel Macron will be able to get a majority or not in the National Assembly, although our political system is made in a way that for sure, usually the presidents, they get a huge majority. So I think it's part of the interesting discussion, especially as Emmanuel Macron for the second round has been elected also with, some, not necessarily some votes that are supporting Emmanuel Macron, but rather there were a lot of votes, especially from the left. There were some votes against Marine Le Pen. So Where Sandro is right is that there's a clear challenge now because the country is divided. And I think this country is divided into these three political blocks that I was talking about. And maybe we can add a fourth block that is abstention, and the level of abstention keeps rising election after election. Nevertheless, from our perspective, and I'm going to conclude on this, I see some hope because there's been a higher mobilization in some sector of the society that I was talking about. Some hope as well because there's a wish of building another majority than the one led by Emmanuel Macron, and some hope as well because as we're talking, that's why I was joining late. We're currently discussing with the left, with the rest of the left organization, to try to unify our bloc and come together to the legislative elections.
So my question goes now to Mr. Bellamy, and Manon Aubry spoke of this need of a real sort of political transformation that reflects a new political reality, and we've seen this now in those elections. So how do you see, what conclusion do you draw for your own party, because we know that this is a bit the end of the political establishment as it used to be, and your LR party also has suffered, a lot in this election. So, could you explain a bit how you see the consequences of all this?
Thank you very much, first of all. And I think that there is one lesson we can all share about this election, is that we are going through a very, very deep democratic crisis in France today. The real surprise of this election was that there was, in fact, no surprise in the end. And during all the mandates, Emmanuel Macron was in the polls facing Marine Le Pen. We all expected that something would happen, and nothing, in fact, could disturb this scenario that was both the expression of the crisis of our traditional political families, of course, but also the expression of the tactics both from Emmanuel Macron and from Marine Le Pen to be in front of each other in the second round. It's this new cleavage that Emmanuel Macron wanted to settle as a definitive option, either progressives or populists, either pro-European forces or anti-European forces, like a new binary choice that French people should make. And in the end, this is not a real choice. And this election was more about who I want to reject more than whom I want to choose, and whose project I want for my country. And this is a real in-depth democratic crisis when we see that, in fact, this cleavage is made of sociological and social oppositions, as said before me, Sandro Gozzi and Manon Aubry. I share this point. We have a society that is deeply divided now through this economical, geographical, sociological dimension, which is not, in fact, a real democratic dispute about what is the future we want for our country. And I think we can all share also that it was quite a depressing campaign from this side when it comes to the debate we could have. It's more an opposition of two Frances that are in front of each other. Just maybe two statistics that are very relevant to me, in addition to the ones that have already been given by Politico's journalists just before. The first one is in Paris. You quoted Paris area, but in the city of Paris, 85% of people voted in favor of Emmanuel Macron in the second round. 85. So you have the city. Every decision is made with this French centralism that is massively choosing one candidate against the other. And this shows the depth of the divide in France. You have the camp of those who decide and the camp of those who follow, the camp of those who write history and the camp of those who have the feeling that they are only going through an history that they can't make. And this is a very, very dangerous democratic trap for France. And then the second statistics I wanted to point is that among people earning less than 1,300 euros in France, half of them didn't go to vote. The abstention is massively in the popular active classes. And this is also a very impressive statistics. You have a France that is now suffering in silence. And what will happen when this silence will end? Of course, this democratic crisis is in a big part the responsibility of our traditional political families, socialist and the center-right, who led this country for 70 years, are now under 6% combined together. This gives the feeling of the work we have to do to rebuild a real democratic alternative, not a sociological fight between two blocs that can only, in the end up in the same way, but a real democratic alternative so that elections can be the occasion of a change, of a choice, of a hope, everything that was not at stake in this kind of election. And this is the work we have to do. If I have one dissentiment to what you said before, I don't think this is the end of the traditional cleavage. I think that you can trust the fact that in the years to come, we will revive the democratic spirit in France and we'll be back.
So speaking of the new forces that have emerged, Manon Aubry, I have a question for you. Since you have been committed to now try to form a real left-wing group for the legislative election in June, I think that a lot of French people now are wondering, how will you create this group, since inside, and you know, we all look at the negotiation now, but how can we combine in one group the socialists, the Greens, who often have very dividing positions, especially on Europe? Is this an alliance of circumstances, or is it a future alliance really based on substance? How will you be able to compromise? Because this is the big question now.
Yeah, no, I mean, of course, I would need probably more time to answer that question. So if anyone is interested, you can reach out to me, because it's obviously a very important question. And let me be clear on this. Our objective here is not to form a circumstantial alliance or an electoral alliance. Here, the objective is not to say, oh, you're going to be elected there and you're going to be elected there, and we just divide up the country. Our objective here is to create a political alliance that is therefore based on substance. And that's the core of the discussion we're having at the moment. So I'm just here right now a 45 minutes break with you, but I'm spending my whole days and nights at the moment actually negotiating with the Greens, with the socialists, and with the communists. And I can say, I think that there's a common way forward. Let's take the European Union, for example. If you take our programs, you know, all of us, we want to, let me take an example. We want to nationalize EDF, which is an electricity company, so that we can control prices, for example. All of us, we want to invest in green transition. And I could make a long list of this. And it's clear that to implement those proposals, they are in contradiction with some of the EU law, being the competition law, if you want to nationalize EDF, being the austerity rules, what we call it, the austerity rules, but technically the Growth and Stability Pact. And there are clear contradictions. And everyone acknowledges this. So we're working together on finding ways forward, not to respect some of the EU rules on economic issues in particular, to be able to implement our program, not going against the EU, but rather taking the opportunity to change the EU. And we all know, especially here from the EU bubble, that's the way the EU has always worked. I know Germany, for example, has been negotiating that the management of water. I mean, they've been taking out drinkable water out of a directive to privatize water, for example. And I could take a long list. Spain has done some efforts to change the rules to be able to cap prices on energy, and this is also going against competition law, etc., etc. So I'm just taking that example to tell you we're working on it. The next few days will tell you whether we've managed. But our idea is not to have something circumstantial that has no political content. What we're doing here is potentially historical, because we're rebuilding the left, I hope, for a long period of time, because there's been the first round of the presidential election that I think did clarify some issues. And there's been a clear support. You know, Jean-Luc Mélenchon and our movement, we did 22% of the votes. The Greens did 4%. The Communists did 2%. And the Socialists, that has been governing this country, you know, no more than 5 years ago, is 1.5%. Because there's been some discontent from the left family, let's say, from the left voters, on the way the socialists have governed the country 5 years ago. So now there's some clarity that we need some clear leadership, but also some clear ambition, especially on social and ecological issues. And at this stage, I remain hopeful that we'll manage it, because I think there's a high expectations. But also I think that if we manage to form a strong, unified and consistent bloc, we can also really dispute Macron's neoliberal policies, especially on social issues, because you might know one of the big issues that is debated in France, for example, is the retirement age that Macron wants to put up to 65 years old. And that's part of the things where the left is united on defending a 60 years old pension age. So those are just some examples. And talking from the negotiation, and I can tell you that the core of the discussion are precisely on content.
The other big negotiation that will happen in every single group right now, but I'm thinking now of the majority, Mr. Gozzi, Macron will certainly struggle to find a stable majority in the parliament. I mean, do you think it's true, or would you say, no, that's not true?
It is the voters who will decide. If I have to see what the exit polls, what your colleagues are saying in this nowadays in Paris, all the struggle, I mean, is largely exaggerated. I mean, it seems that we can have an absolute majority in the National Assembly. So, I mean, the point, in my view, is not to say today what will be the outcome of the legislative election. Any election can be won in the evening of the election, not before. So this is why we are very committed now in working to provide the President of the Republic with a solid majority in the National Assembly. And let me say, from this perspective, that a legislative election is not the third round of a presidential election.
Yeah, but that's what many people say. It is the third round.
It's not like that. It is not that, I mean, I failed in the first round, I failed in the second round, I will try and step in the third round. It's absolutely not. So there are two different elections with two different dynamics. In the legislative elections, what it counts is, first of all, the political program that you present to the voters, and of course, the quality of the candidates in the different constituency, and also the way in which they are rooted or they are connected with the local constituency. So, I mean, to really think that it is around, in my view, it is intellectually wrong, and it is not the way of not the right way to propose it. It is clear that, I mean, I agree with your introduction in saying that the French political landscape has fundamentally changed. And in my view, at the national level, the old world will not come back. I mean, at the national level, I see as very difficult that the socialist or the Republican can have a comeback in the future. And in this new landscape, I see two extreme. An extreme, I don't put them on the same level, in the same basket, of course, but I see the extreme right of Marine Le Pen and of other people who are looking at Marine Le Pen. There are also people in the party of François Bellamy who are looking at Marine Le Pen, but I don't want to enter into the discussion within the Républicains in their relation with the extreme right. And you got a proposal of extreme left, which is La France Insoumise. I think that a big performance of Mélenchon is to propose as a new left proposal which are of all traditional extreme left. I mean, they talk about nationalization, they talk about freezing the prices, they talk about all the recipes that are perfect to produce unemployment. Whereas we have reached the lowest level for unemployment, especially for youth, in the last 40 years. Manon Aubry was talking about neoliberal policies. I don't know what she means, a neoliberal policy of a government which have massively invested against the pandemic crisis and massively invested against the social crisis. So, I mean, my reading of neoliberal policies are policies who do not invest, who do not make investment to help little entrepreneurs, to help the most fragile part of the societies. We have done exactly the opposite. And we have done the opposite by lowering the taxation instead of increasing the taxation, which is another old recipe of the extreme left. So this is the landscape. In this landscape, we think that we have to continue to go beyond the old cleavages between left and right. There again, in the introduction, some of your speakers were talking about center left, center right. In my view, this vocabulary is over. There isn't a center left, a center right. There is an extreme left, an extreme right, and there is a wide central majority which we want to increase. If you want to expand.
Mr. Gozzi, I feel Mr. Bellamy is not really in line with what you're saying.
I'm sure.
Is there a central? Is there a center left and a center right, Mr. Bellamy? Do you think Mr. Gozzi is right when he says this?
There is now a central majority. Please, I'm going to listen to François.
I don't want to interrupt Sandro Gozzi, of course, but it's clear that this narrative is first of all, this narrative is wrong, first of all, because we have the presidential election, but I'm completely in line with Sandro Gozzi when he says that the other elections are not the third round of the presidential election. And what we see in France is that the political cleavage still exists, because La République En Marche just doesn't have any existence on the local ground, for example. So now Emmanuel Macron is criticizing us for being a party of local elected people. But that's exactly, of course, what is France and French politics about also. So it's not right that today we have only 3 political forces. It's wrong. The second point is what Sandro Gozzi is describing seems to be a political nightmare. Why? Because the far right and the far left have one characteristic, is that they can't win in the end. If Jean-Luc Mélenchon would have been in front of Emmanuel Macron in the second round, he would have lost. And I don't want to criticize Manon for the campaign they led. It was an impressive campaign. But it's clear that in front of the so-called center candidates, every extreme political force, extreme right, extreme left, and I don't confuse them at all, me neither, but they would lose. So, in fact, what is democracy about? Democracy is about the possibility to change your leaders. And if you can't change your leader, if there is no scenario in which the leadership can change, then you are in a democratic trouble, in a democratic crisis. And it's exactly what I was trying to describe before. It's exactly the reason why we have to try to rebuild alternatives to this majority. I love democracy and I love pluralism. And I think that democracy is about cleavage, not a cleavage between the good and the bad ones, not a cleavage between the ones that can win and that win always and the ones that can never win, because this is not a cleavage, this is not democracy. And what my biggest fear for my country today is that we are seeing a country full of resentment, full of misunderstandings, full of the feelings that no one can at no point change something in the way things are dealt with. And this is extremely dangerous. And this is, let me say, the very dangerous game that Emmanuel Macron is partly responsible about. When he started his new mandate in 2017, he said, there's no one in France will ever have a reason to vote for Marine Le Pen. And in the end, never has Marine Le Pen gone so high in the results. So Mr. Gozzi says that some people in the right are looking towards Marine Le Pen. I don't know what he's speaking about. We decided to stay firm on our convictions. But the fact is that the biggest ally of Marine Le Pen is Emmanuel Macron, and the biggest ally of Emmanuel Macron is clearly Marine Le Pen, because in the end, even if he has a majority of unpopular opinions in France, he was re-elected, not because he was supported by a majority of people, but because a majority of people decided that he would be better than having Marine Le Pen. This is not a healthy democracy scenario,
but Mr.
and
Bellamy,
I think that we can all share this idea.
You talk about this level of...
Sorry, but I mean...
You can respond, Mr. Gotti.
It's a very strange narrative, because, I mean, it seems that it is Macron who decides for all the French voters. It's the French voters who gave to the party of François Bellamy 4.8%. And you were saying before the election, François Xavier, that the real poll, it is when the French go to the polls. And the French went to the polls and they give to your political proposal 4.8%. Is this the responsibility of Emmanuel Macron, or is this the crisis of your party? Because you cannot say that Macron is responsible for the crisis of the traditional parties, because Macron has got the courage in 2017 to denounce the crisis of traditional politics, and to put on the table a new political proposal.
Yeah, let's hear Mr. Bellamy on this. This is interesting.
In 2022, which has been confirmed by the French in 2022, and it never happened in the Fifth Republic that an incumbent president, not in cohabitation, would won the election like Emmanuel Macron did. So I mean, all this crisis you are describing, I mean, it is certainly a change. And the change is continuing, and the change affected strongly the Socialist Party in 2017. And in my view, the changing is affecting very much your political party nowadays. But I think that what we have to focus is not on this part of the discussion. We have to focus on what we have to do now in the legislative election, because compared to 2017, the world has changed deeply, and France has changed, because you got a yellow vest crisis, to which we provide answer, and that was the result of 30 years of Engels, 30 years of Engels. And you had the pandemic crisis, and then you got the Ukrainian crisis. So I mean, it is like a century ago to talk about 2017. Let's see what we can do for the country, from Europe, to answer to these challenges. Our proposal is very clear.
Mr. Gauthier, I'm sorry, but I think it's good for also Mr. Bellamy to respond.
Very short answer from my side, and then I'd be happy to hear also Manon on this issue. But
yes.
I say that the party I represent is fully responsible of its own crisis. So I don't want to give any excuse to this, and we have our homework to do, that's for sure. But it is also true that Emmanuel Macron decides that his only sparring partner would be Marine Le Pen. And during the whole mandate, he acted in that way. Now he is trying to divide our political families, to destroy completely the center-left and the center-right. And he's acting like this because he knows that his best chance to be the main force in the French political landscape is to have this extreme forces as only opponents. During the European election, Mr. Gozzi, your candidate, Mrs. Loiseau, refused any debate, for example, with our political families. The only debates she accepted was in front of Mr. Bardella from the National Front, because they wanted, both of them wanted to create the scenario where there would be the two major forces opposing themselves. Why was it like this? We knew a France in which no one would ever debate with the National Front. And I don't say that this was healthy, but now we are in a situation where the president only debates with the National Front. And this is also what happened during this campaign. And I think that this is extremely, this is a very clear tactics from Emmanuel Macron's point of view.
Manon Aubry, do you agree with this, with those tactics?
Yeah, I very much tend to agree with François Xavier, and clearly it's a sort of a comfortable opponent to have Marine Le Pen as the open for the second round, because Emmanuel Macron knows that then he could do the game again after, you know, what we call in French, the Republican France, with, you know, a lot of, including left people that are afraid of the far right and are voting for Emmanuel Macron. But as I said earlier, it's not a vote in favor of Emmanuel Macron, it's a vote against Marine Le Pen. And Emmanuel Macron will have to take this into account in the way he governs. And you know, for sure, the first round, and Sandro Gozzi is clear, the first round, Emmanuel Macron did the best score, so he is the one that had the most support. But he should keep in mind that for the second round, there is a significant part of the voters that was like a vote by default. So it also means that it's not like 58% of the voters that share the program of Emmanuel Macron. And the reason why I'm saying it is because you can see, like, the very first day after the election, you know, the evening of the election, Emmanuel Macron tells us that it has changed and things will be different. And you know, the next day we're starting right away on the debate on the pension reform that I was talking about, that I think will not gather a majority in the country. So this is why it's very important to take this into account. And let's see if Emmanuel Macron will manage to get a majority or not in the parliament. But in any case, you know, our country is divided into those three blocks. We're taking our responsibility on our side and the left bloc to try to unify that bloc, try to be powerful, because, you know, all in all, we missed the second round by just 1 point of percentage, by just 400,000 votes. Clearly, there was not enough to get to the second round, but clearly, I think there's a significant, you know, part of the society that is not far left, as Sandro Gozzi would say. I'm not considering myself as far left. I'm just considering myself as someone who indeed wants to cap prices that are increasing for people, that wants to increase the minimum wage, that want to better share wealth, and that indeed is not in favor of the tax you know, breaks and the tax gifts that have been given by Emmanuel Macron to the richest. And the projects are completely different from what Emmanuel Macron is proposing and from what we're proposing. And I think, just to come back on a very last point on the way our country is divided, and potentially the difficulty for the right wing, is clearly that Emmanuel Macron is doing what he's been doing to the right wing, what he's been doing to the left. It has clarified in a way in the left-wing side, because some green people, some socialist people have been going to Emmanuel Macron, and the same goes now for some right-wing people. And now he's been moving more and more to the right, which in a way it's helping us as well in rebuilding a strong left-united family. And clearly it will be difficult in the coming months and years for the right wing, because mostly, I think Emmanuel Macron is identified as such in the opinion.
Yes, Mrs. Aubray, I might need to interrupt you just because I think we need to switch a little bit also to the debate on Europe, which is important for us and for you too. Before we switch to the questions of our viewers, there are now two major forces, two big forces in France, and I'm thinking of the National Rally and I'm thinking of La France Insoumise, that have won on a, let's say, rather Eurocritical platform, or I won't use the term Eurosceptic, but I think National Rally is clearly Eurosceptic. Is this going to make, in your view, and I ask this question to all three of you, is it going to make Macron's pro-European Federalist vision more complicated in the next 5 years? And I'll start with you, Mr. Gozzi.
Absolutely not. On the contrary, Emmanuel Macron was already de facto the European leader in the European Union, especially after, the end of the 16 years of Angela Merkel chancellery. And he has never hidden is the European project. He has clearly presented his European project in La Sorbonne speech, and he has implemented the La Sorbonne speech. We don't have the time, but we can go through all the results that we have already achieved compared to what Emmanuel Macron announced as his European vision for Europe in September 2017. And I think that also this election was an election where European issues and also the war in Ukraine played a central role in the debate. I mean, it wasn't a central role in all the electoral behavior, but they played a central role. And there again, Emmanuel Macron was very clear in what he wants to do to transform
Mr. Gauthier, he will have to.
So
he will have to consider a bloc of people who are not as federalist as he is.
The problem is, beg your pardon?
He will have to consider a bloc of people who are not as pro-European, pro-federalist that he is. How is he going to consider these people?
First of all, I mean, you say it's a federalist. I'm the only federalist in the delegation of Renaissance, but okay, it's fine if you consider him like that. But the point is that we have to transform Europe. We have to change Europe. We have to build up a Europe which provides concrete solutions. And those concrete solutions are also answers to the call for more security that there is in France, because we know that to provide more security, to provide a better border control, to provide more effective migration policies, to provide a Europe which really can become an actor of collective security in the continent, in the world, we need to build up that European power that we don't have yet. So, I mean, it is clear that when we talk about European power, we take into account the concern of also the voters that didn't opt for Emmanuel Macron, neither in the first round nor probably in the second round. When we put the focus at the heart of European action, the Green Deal, the ecological transition, and also the social flanking measures that must go hand in hand with the Green Deal and the ecological transition, we want to give an answer also to that part of the electorate to which also Manon Aubry was referring to, that are more sensitive, especially youths, to the issue of social inequality of the Green Deal. So, I mean, this is why I reacted to your question. I mean, these are our will to change Europe, our will to transform Europe around the idea of a European power which protects, around the idea of a digital sovereignty, for example, to put under control the very large online platform, as we will do with the digital services sector, which we have just adopted under the French presidency. What we want to do to reform Schengen and the Migration Pact. What we want to do also to promote, to revive the Stability and Growth Pact and to promote a more effective investment policy at European level to boost growth and to fight against inequalities. These are all answers, not only to a part, but not only to a few voters, but to the many voters in France. So I think that the European agenda of Macron will be boosted by this debate and also by this commitment to focus on issues which are obviously at the center of the French worries, because the issue of education, of schools, of social aids, of a new method, more social
Mr.
dialogue.
Gauthier, I'll have to interrupt you because we're running out of time. Sorry, but I wanted to hear also Mr. Bellamy and Mrs. Aubry on the approach on Europe, which is very important because the LR the Republican Party in France, there's an issue with their vision also on Europe. How can LR survive? What is the sort of the European vision that they need to have to either be part of a pro-European bloc or a more Eurosceptic one? I feel like this is one of the big sort of, there's an identity crisis here.
I wouldn't say so. We led a European election campaign that showed our unity on the European issues. And today, I mean, in our political family, we don't have federalists and we don't have Frexiters. We are united on the fact that we want to share the European project, but with a very pragmatic, serious, concrete, constructive approach. And I'm so happy that you described Emmanuel Macron as federalist, because it's not what he tells about himself in the French politics today. But it's clear that we do not share a federalist agenda. It doesn't make us less pro-Europeans. And I completely disagree idea that we would have this kind of two blocks again in the European spectrum today. The real cleavage in the European spectrum is not between pro-European and anti-European forces, it's between right and left. And political families that are not more or less pro-European, but that have different visions of what Europe should be. And this is exactly what democracy is about once again. The second point, and I will be very brief on this, but I'm very worried about the next steps now in the relation between France and Europe. Because what we see, I'm in Prague now for the bureau of the EPP group in Czech Republic, working on European issues. And what we see is that France is and has become, under Emmanuel Macron's leadership, more and more an issue for the equilibrium of Europe as a whole. We made last year the worst trade balance in our history. We are one of the highest public debt country in our global budgetary expenditure. We are in a situation of economic divergence, deep economic divergence with the rest of the European Union. Even Greece, Italy, Spain made very important reforms that we didn't make. The issue is not the COVID spending. Every country spent a lot of public money to face the COVID consequences. The issue is not the Ukraine crisis. The issue is more of the concrete structural situation of our country that prevents us from having a great, strong answer to the inequality issues that we are facing today, and that would prevent us from having a strong resilience facing new crises. When we are seeing inflation skyrocketing, when we are seeing the fact that debt will be more and more costly in the next months and years, I think that we will have to do a concrete homework in France to make again a reliable partners for its European friends. And what I say is that when Sandro Gozzi is now explaining is that Emmanuel Macron will try to reinvent the Stability Pact, I think that today it's very clear that the French government doesn't have credibility to do so. We are in the situation of somebody who doesn't pay its share of the bill at the end of a dinner in a restaurant and explains that the principle of a bill is a little bit old-fashioned and we have to invent a new world. I think that the problem is that being really pro-European starts with holding its promises and being at the forefront of European credibility, and this is what we are very much lacking today.
Mrs. Aubry, do you share these concerns about France not playing the role that it should play in Europe in the next 5 years? Do you feel like this is Macron will lack legitimacy to really sort of push through his reforms, his agenda on the EU?
Well, let me start first maybe from the level of expectation that is there. And I think it's high not only because France will hold the presidency until the end of June, but also because I think the European Union is at a turning point. It is at a turning point, of course, because it is challenged after more than 2 years of COVID, the war in Ukraine, and clearly we have even more challenges coming in front of us. And I think it is the time for the EU to choose whether we continue in the same path or whether we adapt ourselves to the challenges. So let's take the war in Ukraine, comes the question on our dependency on some of the energies coming from Russia. So it's interesting to explore, for example, the common purchase of oil and gas, but even going further, getting out and how do we get out of the fossil fuel dependencies. We've seen that the COVID crisis has also pushed us to question ourselves in our industrial capacity, but also in building a sort of a health European Union, defending TRIPS waiver. But also, when we think about challenges, we of course think about climate challenges, and there is some tension at the moment in the European Union. Let's be clear on, postponing some of the climate objectives, which I think is a danger because it will just mean that we will make the climate crisis sooner than expected. We also know that there are a lot of rules that have been suspended after the COVID crisis, being the austerity measures and the European semester, being some of the competition law measures. And I think it's interesting to question ourselves whether we re-establish them the same way they were, or whether it's time to change them. And I think, as I said, to conclude on this, we are the turning point, and we'll be pushing for a new path for the European Union to actually take those challenges into account. And I think the most important challenges are clearly, climate change, the rise of inequalities as well, and the question of industries and our EU capacities when it comes to industrial production. And those are actually interesting and nice challenges ahead of us. And I'm sure the three of us will keep debating on this, because we don't necessarily have the same solutions.
Mrs. Aubry, thank you so much. I will have to conclude this conversation, and I thank a lot our panelists here. I think it was very interesting to at this stage understand how challenging this period of time will be for France, for both and from a national perspective to an EU one. I think there are still a lot of questions arising, and we will see how this whole political reconfiguration will unfold, and how these three blocks will emerge, and how this whole new political life will be like in France. Thank you also for all our viewers, and I'm sorry that we didn't have enough time to take questions from the audience, but it was a very interesting one, a very interesting conversation, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This is an age of disruption, of profound revolutionary change.
What we're really asking ministers is to empower the ambassadors.
The only thing that you really push forth is the truth.
You don't see many women represented when it comes to the decisions as to how to handle the pandemic.